She was barely breathing, collapsed near the riverbed, blood trailing behind her. The rangers knew they had minutes, maybe seconds, to save her, but no one expected him to come crashing through the trees, not with gratitude, not with relief, but with a rage so intense it made even the rescuers freeze. The call came just after sunrise. Deep in the heart of the Carpathian Mountains, a group of wildlife rangers received a report from a nearby hiker. Something about a bear, bleeding, not moving. When they arrived, the forest was unusually silent. There, near the rocky banks of a glacial stream, she lay, massive, still, and barely breathing. Her thick fur was soaked in blood. A crude metal snare had torn into her hind leg, the flesh raw and exposed. It was clear she had fought for hours, maybe all night, to break free, and she had, barely. Two rangers, Anna and Luca, approached cautiously. Even injured, a bear could be deadly. But this one, she didn't move. Only her eyes tracked them, tired, wild, and full of pain. They whispered to each other, strategizing. Anna moved to her head, speaking gently. Luca opened the tranquilizer kit. Just as the dart hissed into her shoulder and her body slumped, a sound rolled through the trees, a low, rumbling growl. Not far off, not distant, close. Anna froze. Luca looked up, scanning the woods. Branches snapped. Then, without warning, a towering male bear burst through the underbrush, snorting, foaming, and locked onto them with eyes that burned with fury. And that's when they realized she hadn't been alone. The male skidded to a halt just a few feet away, his massive paws kicking up moss and dirt. His breath came in ragged bursts, chest heaving, jaws parted in a snarl that made the forest feel smaller. Anna didn't move. Neither did Luca. They both knew. Any sudden motion could turn this into a bloodbath. The tranquilizer wouldn't work fast enough. Not for him, and certainly not if he believed they were the threat. "He thinks we hurt her," Anna whispered, barely audible. Luca nodded, slowly lowering the dart gun to the ground. "Back away," he murmured. "No eye contact, just slow." But as Anna shifted her weight to retreat, the male's eyes narrowed. He took a single step forward, then another. His head lowered, his lips curled. And then he roared, not the kind of sound meant to scare off predators. This was grief and rage, and something primal that cracked through the trees like thunder. The sound sent birds flapping from the canopy. The mother bear stirred faintly, whimpering in her sedation. The male heard it. He rushed forward, not at the rangers, but toward her. Anna and Luca flinched, thinking the worst. But what he did next, neither of them was prepared for. He knelt beside her. A bear that size, over 600 pounds of muscle and fury, dropped to the ground like a fallen statue. He nudged her gently with his snout, then placed one giant paw across her side, as if to shield her from the world. She made a faint sound, barely a moan, and he let out a soft, broken huff. Then he turned, not toward her, toward Anna, and something had shifted in his gaze. Less fury, more pleading, like he understood, like he was begging for help, without knowing how. Luca whispered, "I think he wants us to save her." Anna didn't respond. She couldn't. Her throat had gone tight. For a moment, three species stood locked in silence. Two humans, two bears, and one impossible choice. They couldn't leave her untreated, but they couldn't risk another move without him reacting. Then something unthinkable happened. The male bear stood again, walked to the edge of the clearing, and lay down, facing them, watching, waiting. It wasn't surrender, it was trust. But trust, they would soon learn, had a cost. Because that night, he came back, and this time he wasn't alone. The moon had barely crested over the tree line when Anna heard it again. A low rumble, almost like a growl, but layered with something deeper. A warning, a presence. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped onto the wooden deck of the ranger cabin, scanning the tree line. Eyes, 4 of them. No 6. The male was back, and behind him, 2 younger bears emerged from the brush, smaller but clearly grown. His offspring? Luca joined her at the door, squinting into the dark. They're circling. Anna's heart sank. He didn't come to fight. No, Luca muttered. He came to show us something. The bears didn't advance. Instead, they fanned out around the edge of the clearing, like sentries taking position. The male stood at the center, unmoving, regal, unblinking. What is he doing? Anna whispered. I think he's guarding her. The mother bear was still recovering in the makeshift medical pen. Her breathing was steadier now, the tranquilizers fading. She stirred occasionally but remained too weak to stand. Anna stepped down from the deck slowly, hands raised. The male didn't flinch. The young ones didn't growl. Instead, as Anna reached the gate of the pen, the big male stepped forward again. One pace, two, then stopped, just feet from her. Their eyes met. In that moment, Anna saw something no textbook or wildlife manual had ever taught her. Pain, loyalty, hope. He let out a low huff, dipped his head toward the pen, then sat down, like a silent permission, like he was entrusting her with everything. Anna nodded slowly and moved to the gate. She knelt beside the mother bear and gently checked her vitals again. Stronger now. Her heartbeat had steadied. The male huffed again, and this time it wasn't a sound of anger. It was relief, but it didn't last. From the shadows, another sound echoed. A branch breaking, fast footsteps, human ones. Stop! Luca's voice rang out, sharp and terrified. A flash of movement. A poacher, gun in hand, aimed not at the humans, but at the bear. Anna barely had time to react before the male roared, not in sorrow this time, but in sheer fury. The clearing exploded into chaos. The young bears charged. Luca fired a warning shot into the air, and the poacher turned to run, but he didn't make it far. The male bear was faster. Anna could only watch in horror and awe as nature balanced itself in a way no law ever could. When the dust settled, the forest was quiet again, and the male bear returned to the pen, standing once more beside the mother. Her eyes flickered open. Weakly, she looked up at him, and he lowered his massive head to touch hers. The moment his head touched hers, something shifted. It wasn't just a gesture of affection. It was recognition, a silent promise. I found you. I kept you safe. The mother bear, still groggy, let out a faint sound, somewhere between a whimper and a growl. But when she saw his face, the tension in her body eased. Her paw moved, almost imperceptibly, toward his, and he didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply stayed by her side, shielding her with his massive frame, even as his breathing grew heavier, as if every breath carried the weight of the night. From the edge of the clearing, the two younger bears watched, unmoving. But Anna noticed something strange. One of them, a slightly smaller one, was pacing, restless, eyes darting toward the trees. Then she heard it. More footsteps, not human, not bears, wolves, attracted by the gunshot, the blood, the scent of weakness. A low growl began to rise from the forest around them, circling like a dark halo. Anna turned to Luca. We need light, sound, now. Luca ran back into the cabin, flipping on the floodlights. They blasted into the night, casting long shadows across the clearing. The wolves froze, but they didn't back away. Anna grabbed a flare from the emergency kit and lit it, holding it high. The hiss of fire, the sudden blaze. It startled the wolves for a moment, but it wouldn't hold them long. The male bear stood up slowly, towering, massive. He didn't move toward the wolves. He just stood between them and the injured female, unshaken, his breath fogging in the cold night air, his eyes fixed forward. The alpha wolf stepped out from the trees, a snarl, then another step. And that's when the male bear let out a roar, one that cracked through the silence like thunder. Not out of anger, but out of something ancient, primal, protective. The sound made the wolves pause. Even the wind seemed to stop. The alpha hesitated, sniffed the air, and finally, with a flick of his tail, turned. The rest followed. The woods grew silent again. Anna sank to her knees. She had never seen anything like it. Not in textbooks, not in documentaries, not even in her dreams. This was something else. This was love. The silence that followed the wolves' retreat wasn't empty. It was thick, dense with everything that had just happened. Luca stepped beside Anna, his eyes wide. That wasn't just instinct. Anna nodded slowly, still watching the male bear. He had lowered himself again beside the injured female, nuzzling her gently, checking her breathing, her eyes, her paws. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't panicked. He was calm, steady, present, like he had done this before, like he knew what love meant. The younger bears cautiously approached now, drawn in by the safety their father had created. One of them, a bold cub with a scar above his right eye, came right up to the female's side, sniffed her, then laid down next to her with a soft huff. And the male? He didn't push him away. He let him stay. He even placed his paw lightly over both of them, a gesture so human it made Anna's breath catch. Behind her, the rangers had arrived, late, but ready with tranquilizers, medical packs, and stretchers. One of them asked Anna if they should sedate the bears for treatment, but she shook her head. "Wait," she said. "Just wait." She didn't know why, but something in her gut told her this wasn't over yet, because the male bear was doing something more. He leaned in closer to the female's face, his breath slow and rhythmic. And then he roared again, not loud, not terrifying, but low, close, guttural. It was as if he was calling her back, reminding her to fight. And that's when the female bear blinked, a twitch of the ear, a groggy, uncertain breath. Then another. She was waking up. Anna gasped. "She's responding!" Luca rushed to grab the emergency fluid bag and move closer. But the male bear growled softly, not aggressive, just protective. He placed his head gently on the female's side, anchoring her with his warmth. And for a moment, everything was still, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The stars above flickered brighter. The wind moved through the trees in reverence. And in that tiny clearing, in the shadow of fear and violence, something sacred unfolded. Not just survival, connection, devotion, family. No one dared speak. Even the youngest ranger, who just hours ago had never seen a bear up close, stood rooted to the spot, his eyes wide with something between awe and fear. Because what they were witnessing was no longer just wildlife behavior. It was a kind of language, a ritual, a story playing out in fur, breath, and instinct. The female's chest rose and fell again, shallow but rhythmic. Then her paw twitched. The male noticed it first. He stood slowly, towering, but not threatening. He looked down at her with a strange mix of reverence and urgency, as if encouraging her to rise. The cubs stirred beside her, crowding in with soft huffs and gentle nudges. And then, she groaned. It wasn't loud, it wasn't strong, but it was enough. She tried to roll, her limbs sluggish but functional. Her eyelids fluttered open, dazed and clouded, but aware. Her breathing, once shallow and fading, now deepened. And the male? He didn't roar this time. He sighed, a deep, soul-heavy breath that released everything. The fear, the tension, the rage. His massive shoulders dropped as he stepped back, giving her space, yet never leaving her side. Anna felt her eyes welling. Luca whispered, "She made it," but Anna knew better. She was making it because of him, because whatever had bound these two creatures, through instinct or memory, pain or past, had just rewritten every assumption they had ever held about wild animals. They weren't wild, not in the way humans use the word. They were grieving partners, protective mates, devoted parents. One of the cubs pressed its head into the female's belly, nuzzling her. Another lay across her front leg as if to say, "We're still here." And the last cub looked up at the male and took a small step closer, then another, before pressing his body gently against the great bear's chest. The male didn't move. He didn't growl. He simply lowered his massive head and touched his nose to the cubs. It was done. They were together. They had survived. And somewhere beyond the trees, the moon finally broke through the clouds, casting silver light over the clearing, as if nature itself was offering a quiet blessing. Anna turned to Luca, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't treat this like any other rescue." "No," Lucas said. "We document it. We protect them. And we let the world see this. Because the world needed to know that monsters didn't cry over fallen mates. Beasts didn't nudge their loved ones back to life. But this bear, he still was." The forest held its breath. Even the leaves seemed still, as though the very trees were honoring the moment. A moment stitched together not with words or reason, but with something older, something deeper. Love, the kind that existed in silence, the kind that didn't need names. The male bear lay down slowly beside his recovering mate, his body curved protectively around hers. The cubs nestled between them. His massive paw reached across her side, resting lightly, as if to remind her, "You are not alone." Anna wiped a tear from her cheek. "I didn't think I'd ever see something like this in my lifetime," she murmured. Luca nodded, his voice choked. "This changes everything." He reached for his camera, not out of habit but necessity. What they were witnessing needed to be shared, not for spectacle, but for truth, for compassion. And as the lens focused on the sleeping family, the male bear opened one eye. He looked straight at them, not with hostility, not with fear, but with a knowing, a silent plea. "Tell them, show them, let them understand." Because maybe, just maybe, if people saw this, really saw it, they'd think twice before calling wild animals dangerous. They'd question what cruelty looked like, what gentleness looked like, what loyalty looked like. As night settled once again over the forest, the ranger team left the clearing in quiet single file. No one spoke. No one needed to. Behind them, the bear family rested, wounded, healing, whole. And for the first time in days, the forest felt still, not with fear, but with peace. The walk back to camp felt like stepping out of a dream. Every step Anna took, her boots crunching softly against the forest floor, carried the weight of what she'd witnessed, what they all had. The air felt different now, lighter, sacred. Back at the base, Anna found herself sitting alone by the fire, journal in hand, staring at the blank page. But she wasn't sure where to begin. How could you describe something that shattered everything you thought you knew? Not with facts, not with statistics, but with a moment, a raw, unfiltered glimpse into something primal and profound. She wrote about the cubs, about the relief she'd felt when they emerged from the shadows, and about the way the mother had looked back one last time before disappearing into the grass. By the time she set her pen down, the fire had burned low. She closed the journal slowly, feeling the weight of those words settle into her chest like something permanent. It struck her then. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was theirs, a story that belonged to the wild as much as it belonged to her, one that would keep unfolding whether she was there to see it or not. And somehow, that felt right. She glanced once more at the photographs, a faint smile touching her lips. Some bonds didn't fade. They only changed shape. The next few days were filled with a strange quiet. Anna remained at the reserve, continuing her observation work, but nothing she witnessed came close to what she'd seen that morning. The male bear, the one who had fought through fire and fear, was nowhere to be seen. Neither was the mother, but their cubs, now watched over by a rotating team of rangers, were slowly adjusting, eating, playing, healing. But late one evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant ridges, casting long shadows across the savanna, Anna noticed movement along the tree line. It was him, the male bear. He emerged from the trees slowly, his gait uneven but determined. His fur still bore the marks of the fire, scorched patches, scars, but his eyes were locked on the den. And then something incredible happened. The three cubs, who had once cowered and whimpered, ran to him, not hesitantly, not in confusion, but as if they knew, as if he had come back for them. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She raised her binoculars, hardly able to believe it. The massive bear bent low as the cubs surrounded him. One nuzzled his neck, another climbed clumsily over his paw. The third curled against his chest as he lay down in the grass. There was no aggression, no hesitation, only acceptance, only love. Anna lowered the binoculars, her eyes misting. This wasn't just about survival. It was about something deeper, something timeless. The scene stayed etched in Anna's mind, long after the sun had set and the sky turned to velvet. From a distance, she and the other rangers watched in stunned silence as the male bear gently nudged the cubs, one by one, as if inspecting them, checking for wounds, for pain, for anything that might have slipped past the human rescuers. But what he did next silenced even the whispers around the campfire. He stood, not fully, not with the authority of dominance or fear, but with the slow, careful grace of a protector. And then he began pushing dirt toward the smoldered remains of the mother bear's final resting spot. Claw by claw, he moved the earth. He didn't growl, he didn't howl, he mourned. The cubs almost instinctively joined him, not with precision, but with purpose. They mimicked his motions, stumbling beside him, touching the ground where their mother had last lain. A ritual, a goodbye, a legacy written not in words but in silence. Anna turned to Joseph, one of the most seasoned rangers at the reserve, his eyes reflecting the firelight in disbelief. "I've never seen anything like this," he whispered. "It's like he's teaching them, preparing them." "To do what?" Anna asked softly. Joseph looked back toward the bears. "To carry her memory." That night, no one in the reserve slept. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The male bear, whom Anna had started calling Gravel for the way his heavy paws moved soundlessly over the earth, remained by the cubs long after the burial. He didn't leave their side. When one cub whimpered, he pressed his massive head down gently to comfort them. When another tried to wander toward the tree line, he guided it back with a low grunt and a nudge of his shoulder. It was as if a switch had flipped. This wasn't just mourning, this was guardianship, and Anna couldn't understand how. The next morning, the team set up cameras around the area, hoping to monitor Gravel's behavior from afar. What they saw made their jaws tighten and their hearts ache. He was parenting them, with patience, with structure, with fierce, unshakable discipline. He taught them how to sniff for berries, how to swat at logs to find insects, how to climb. When one cub grew tired, he waited. When another grew bold and wandered too far, he chased it, not with fury, but with a deep bark of warning, and then an affectionate nuzzle when they returned. "He's not just watching them," Anna said to the camera, recording a log for the park's behavioral research files. "He's filling the void." And still he hadn't roared, not once, until the 12th night. A distant howl, a rustle in the trees, and then a shriek. One of the cubs was missing. Gravel didn't hesitate. He thundered through the underbrush, not as a lost creature of grief, but as a guardian awakened by fear. The forest lit up with crashing branches and deep growls as Gravel charged into the night. The remaining two cubs cried after him, huddled together by the den. Anna and her team, watching through night vision cameras, could hardly keep up. Then they heard it, a snarl, a clash, a scream, not of a bear, but of something else. When the ranger team caught up to the scene, what they found was unforgettable. Gravel stood over the body of a wildcat, a lynx lean and desperate, likely drawn by the cries of the vulnerable cub. It hadn't stood a chance. Its lifeless form was sprawled against a tree trunk, blood soaking the earth. Gravel, chest heaving, eyes burning, was silent. But in that silence, there was something more deafening than any roar. He turned back, and Anna saw it. His eyes weren't wild. They were terrified. Terrified of what might have happened, of what almost did. And that fear turned to fire. From that day on, Gravel did more than care for the cubs. He built a fortress. Every night, he dragged fallen branches to create a makeshift barrier around their sleeping site. He marked the area aggressively, patrolling in large circles for hours. No creature, not rabbit, not raccoon, dared come close again. The cubs began to change too. Where once they had been clumsy and frightened, now they grew bold, coordinated. They mirrored Gravel's movements, mimicked his caution. Even their play became sharper, like little warriors training under a silent commander. Anna recorded it all, but she knew no camera could truly capture what was happening. This wasn't just rare, it was sacred. But the forest wasn't done testing them. One evening, a violent storm swept across the valley. Winds howled through the trees, ripping branches from trunks and flooding the trails Anna's team had carefully mapped. The research station lost power, and for nearly 12 hours the team was blind. No live feeds, no updates, no visibility. When the skies finally cleared, Anna and her rangers rushed to the last known location of Gravel and the cubs. What they found stopped them cold. A massive tree had fallen directly onto the makeshift den. Panic surged through Anna as she and the others scrambled, lifting branches and pulling debris away with trembling hands. And then, a sound. A deep, low grunt. Faint, but steady. Gravel. He was buried beneath the twisted remains of the den, using his enormous back to shield all three cubs. His body was scratched and bruised, one leg clearly injured. But his eyes locked onto Anna's the moment he saw her. He had stayed there, held the weight of the storm, endured the pain, just so they would live. And they had. The cubs, frightened, soaked, but uninjured, crawled out as the team pulled the last branch off Gravel's side. Anna fell to her knees, tears mixing with rainwater, whispering over and over, "You saved them. You saved them." Gravel, too exhausted to stand, simply closed his eyes. But his breathing, it was steady. He was still with them. That night, as Anna tended to his wounds in the temporary shelter they'd built, the three cubs refused to leave his side. One nuzzled under his chin, another curled against his injured leg, the third pressed its tiny paw to his broad chest, like a silent vow. Gravel had fought the storm. Now they would fight for him. Word of Gravel's actions spread quickly. Within 48 hours, wildlife sanctuaries, international rescue organizations, and major news outlets began reaching out to Anna's team. They called him the bear who became a father. They called him. Photos of him lying in the debris, cubs pressed against his side, made front-page headlines around the world. People sent donations, blankets, medicine. Some even mailed handwritten letters addressed to Gravel the Brave. But for Anna, none of that mattered as much as the bear himself. Despite his injuries, Gravel was healing, slowly but surely. Anna and the team built a larger enclosure where he could recover without stress. And every day, the cubs kept him company, mimicking his movements, grooming his fur, occasionally getting into playful scuffles that made even the stoic Gravel huff a breath that almost resembled a laugh. And then came the moment Anna had secretly feared, the day Gravel stood on all fours again. It was sunrise. A quiet pink light spilled across the trees. Gravel slowly rose, limbs stiff, muscles tight, but with a power that silenced everyone watching. The cubs watched, wide-eyed, and then they followed, step by step, one behind his back leg, one at his side, and the smallest just behind, occasionally stumbling, but never too far. They moved as a unit, Gravel leading, his head high, his breath calm. Not a broken animal, not a former captive, but a leader, a guardian, a father. That day, Anna wrote in her journal, "He was never meant to raise cubs. He wasn't born to nurture. But today I saw something ancient in his steps, a rhythm that doesn't belong to humans or animals, just to love." Weeks turned to months. Gravel had fully recovered. The cubs were no longer stumbling shadows. They had grown into strong, curious young bears, each with a spark that reflected the resilience they'd inherited. Not by blood, but by bond. Anna knew the day would come. She had been preparing herself. The release. It was a quiet morning when the gates opened to the nearby protected forest, a place where human presence was minimal and food was abundant. The team had chosen it carefully, a space where the bears could thrive, undisturbed. Gravel stepped out first. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew they were behind him. The cubs followed, their movements synchronized, almost ceremonial. For a moment, Anna thought they'd vanish into the trees without pause. But just before the last cub disappeared into the foliage, he stopped, turned, and let out a low, soft huff, almost like a goodbye. Anna's throat tightened. She raised her hand instinctively, but Gravel didn't stop. He didn't turn. He simply kept walking, tall, proud, wild again. Not the same bear who had been dragged from the rubble, but something more, something sacred. 2 years later, Anna received a photo in a weathered envelope. No return address, just an image taken by a hidden trail camera. It showed a full-grown male bear, broad, strong, unmistakably gravel, standing under a canopy of golden light. 3 younger bears behind him, pausing mid-step as he surveyed the path ahead. On the back, scribbled in pencil, "Still leading." Anna smiled. Some stories don't need endings. They just need space to keep going. If this story moved you, share it. Let the world see that even in the ashes of destruction, love can rise. Unshakable, unexpected, and unforgettable. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more real to wild stories like this. Because sometimes the strongest hearts walk on 4 legs.